Hello and welcome back. This is Dawn. I've got a fun one for you guys today. Now, this is outside of my comfort zone, but I love to challenge myself and I encourage you to do the same. We're going to be creating this series of jewel-toned monochromatic Christmas cards with just a punch of a contrasting color. They're all going to center around this Honeybee Stamps Winter Birds die. Love this die. It's got a chickadee and a cardinal, but we're going to be just focusing on the chickadee. It's one of my favorite birds. I'm going to be, like I said, using the monochromatic jewel tone. So I've picked 3 shades of each color family and white and dark gray. I'm using all Concord and Ninth and Gina K cardstock today, I believe. I will have all the products linked below. Now I tape my dies down and then I just cut out the portion that I need. That's because the plates on my die cutting machine, the top plate is marred, so I don't want to waste the rest of that cardstock by putting marks on it. I'm going to lay these out on my Spellbinders Platinum 6 and run that through and die cut out all my pieces. Assembling this is really easy, and this die is great because it cuts all of this detail into any of the top layers that we'll be showing, right? So I'll show you here, the wing has so much detail already cut into it, that you really don't need to do much to it. Now, I do have a version of this bird where I've ink blended it. If you've seen my past videos with the florals, it's always something that you can do and it takes it up a notch. But today we're going to be focusing on pretty basic, just die cutting. I'm going to adhere these all together. Now each bird, like I mentioned, is monochromatic with 2 to 3 shades of color of the same family. But all of their throats are going to be this white. And this is going to add kind of like a rest, something to rest the eye. When you're using a lot of color like this, it always helps to add white. Like I said, it just breaks up all of that heavy color and adds a brightness to it. You'll notice that I put a little bit of foam adhesive under his wing. I didn't even peel off the release tape. This will just add a little lift and give me some wiggle room to make sure everything's lined up without it sticking prematurely. And then we will just adhere the cap and the beak and the eye. Now the beak and the eye are these tiny little pieces. So you could opt to use like a, like a souffle pen or something like that. But for all of mine, I did use the die. And having something like this crystal katana really helps to pick up those little pieces and get them in place. I adhered most everything with the Honeybee precision glue. And then I'm adding a little white highlight on his eye using a white gel pen. And again, all of the products that I use will be listed in the will be listed in the description below. Here you can see all those cute little birds and all their little jewel tone colors. Ugh. Now for the background, we're going to use this new Kaleidoscope 3D embossing folder from Honeybee Stamps. Love this. This is my first 3D embossing folder that I've ever used, and I'm hooked. I've lightly misted the cardstock just to make sure that this is gonna put a lot of texture on that cardstock, and I don't want it to crack. So just a little light spray of water on the back helps to keep that cardstock from cracking. I'm gonna line this up. You can tape this in place if you want. I just wing it. Run that through my platinum and there we go. Look at all of that texture. I can't believe it took me so long to get onto the 3D embossing folder bandwagon. These are gorgeous. Now I can't wait to try more. Even the back looks beautiful. I'm going to have to get a lot more 3D embossing folders. So I went ahead and did some other backgrounds because we're going to be making several cards. I'm not going to show you the process of making all of the cards, but I'm going to show you the basic process, and that is the same for all the cards. I'll show you all of the cards at the end because there's quite a few of them. Now, to create our little arrangements, I am using another new set from Honeybee. This is their Winter Greenery layering set. They have a whole series of lovely layers, and there's lots of flowers and filler foliage, and each season has its own little greenery set so far. And I'm in love with this whole series. If you've been watching lately, you know that I've used these lovely layers many, many times. Just gorgeous, gorgeous products. So I've taken several of the pieces and the dies from this set, and I've die cut them all from the various shades of the teal. And now for my contrast color, I'm going to use the Stardust from Concord and Ninth. And I'm using another Lovely Layers die here. This is their poinsettia. And I'm only going to use the very top layer. Now this makes one large poinsettia, but I'm using just the smallest little petals there. And I cut 2 of them and layered them on top of each other to make a little mini poinsettia. Don't be afraid to stretch your dies. And I'll show you, I've used that poinsettia several different ways, and I'll show you in the cards here at the end. So I'm making my arrangement. You see, I'm going back and forth, adding things here and there. This is my basic process. You can see me there thinking, wiggling my fingers. But I just kind of evaluate it, look for where I need more of one color or less of a color, replace things. And I know I'm going to need some more of that Stardust to balance it. So I've cut some of the berries. And now I've cut another piece of that spruce image, and I've just taken a little portion of it, just the tiniest little portion, tucked it in there. You don't always have to use the whole die cut. If it's too big, trim it down. Here you can see I just ripped the stem off of that pine. And I'm going to keep working on this arrangement until I feel like I've got a good balance. And again, this is, temporary. Once I get my sentiment and I figure out where I want to put my sentiment, I might zhuzh this a little bit more, but it helps to have your basic arrangement. I'm going to adhere our flower together so that I can move it around in one piece. I do this often. Anytime it's a little building image, I'll put those together before I adhere everything else, just so that I can move them around a little easier. And I'm leaving a lot of this process in here, sped up of course, just so you guys can get an idea of my process. Hopefully it helps out. There's a lot of little tiny movements. This here, that there, move this over here, before I finally decide. But that's part of the fun. All right, once I get everything pretty much where I know I'm going to want it, I'm going to grab my press and seal. And I've shown this trick before. We're going to lay the press and seal over the entire arrangement. And then I'm going to use my bone folder to burnish over the elements to make sure that the press and seal is adhered to it. I'm going to tape my panel down to the table. And I'm using low tack washi tape here. I don't want it to rip my panel when I pull it off. And then I'm going to burnish the press and seal to my surface on one side. And that's going to allow me to use it like a hinge. And I can move it back and forth as I place layers. Now on this card, I decided not to do them individually. You can see I was like, wait, I don't want to glue all these individually. So instead, I'm going to grab a scrap piece of cardstock in the same color family, and I'm going to glue that across the back of this arrangement. Now what that's going to do is it's going to grab most all of these pieces and hold them in place. That way I can glue them all at once and not have to worry about doing them individually. Now it's going to leave the topmost layers free so that I can adhere them with a little foam tape to pop those up for some dimension. Now I always double check and make sure everything is adhered securely, and then I add either some foam tape or some extra glue under any pieces that may be glued but not securely, right? It only grabbed maybe the very edge of the die cut. Popping up some spots here and there, and now I'm going to add some foam tape to the bird, and I'll just continue adhering these layers. And as I mentioned, this is the same basic technique for all of the cards. It's really fun to try out new color combos, see what works and see what doesn't. And I will have photos of all of the cards over on my blog. So if you want to see individual photos of all of the cards, make sure you head over there, blog.w+9.com. I'll also have a link to that below. Now you can have fun fluffing that up, adding extra foam tape till your heart's content. And now it's time for me to choose a sentiment. This is from the bird song. I think this is, no, it's Let Nature Sing. That's the name of this stamp set. Beautiful sentiments in this stamp set. We're going to treat our cardstock with our Rabbit Hole Designs powder tool here. And we're going to stamp 2 sentiments. I'm indecisive. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp those with Versamark and heat emboss them in white. And then I will die cut both of them out, and this will give me some options. Now, once I know what my sentiment is, I can make any little minor changes or additions to my arrangement to better balance it. I'm going to die cut these sentiments using the coordinating die here. And this is where I was talking about, making any adjustments. So I'm deciding where I want my sentiment and which one I want to use. But I can see it. I want to use that. I want to use the larger one. But then that leaves a odd blank area right there. So I'm going to fix that by just adding a little bit more, right? So I'll just add a little bit more greenery here. Check to see if it's balanced. It's a little bit big. So I'll pull it and I will end up shortening it just a little bit. So you'll see here, I'm making sure, yep, I want to do it. So I'm going to rip off a little piece of that, and now it's the perfect size. It's going to fit up in there nicely and create the perfect balance. I'm going to double stack. No, I think I actually end up triple stacking that sentiment just to give it a little weight before I adhere it. And then I'm going to add some berries using that stardust. Again, we need to sprinkle that stardust color throughout so that it's a little more balanced. Here I'm layering those dies just to give that sentiment a little more heft, a little more weight. And then we'll adhere that underneath. Look, see, I told you I was indecisive. I felt like I needed one more thing. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut another holly leaf while I'm die cutting one more layer for that sentiment. Now it was too big as is, and I've already got foam tape under there, so it's not going to fit the way I want it to. So here's a little trick. Cut it. I'm cutting out a little notch so that it'll fit around the foam tape that I already have under there. Double checking again. And if I still want it smaller, I can cut off a little bit more. But this is going to allow me to tuck it up under there exactly where I want it. So again, don't be afraid to trim down your die cuts. So we're going to adhere that with a little foam adhesive, and then we will adhere our berries and our sentiment. I got to tell you, I had a whole lot of fun making these cards. I think I ended up with 8 or 10 in total. Some of the color combos I wasn't in love with, but that's okay because it led me to the color combos that I did love. So don't be afraid to try different things. I wanted the pattern to go edge to edge on this card, so I've cut a standard card base, and this is, I believe, Peacock from Concord and Ninth, and I'm going to adhere that panel to my card base using some double-sided adhesive. You will want a good strong adhesive when you're using the 3D embossing folders because the back is uneven and you have less surface area to glue your panel. You want to make sure that it's adhered securely with something strong. Now, since I'm using the double-sided adhesive here and it's got a strong grip, I like to take the card and I will lay it on its fold, stand it up on its fold, and then line the panel up and then just bring them together. This way, I am making sure that the fold side is even, and then if I do happen to get it a little off, it's on the free end and I can trim that. I'm using my bone folder to lightly burnish the edges. Be careful. Don't do it too hard because you will flatten your pattern. Okay, time for the next card. Love this one as well. This is using that Stardust. Great color, you guys. It's like a green gold. Beautiful color. And we're going to use the bells from Honeybee Stamps. The layering holiday bells, to be precise. Now, I've already die cut all of my pieces. I showed you that in the last card. I didn't feel like it was necessary for this one. And we're going to start adhering. You'll notice for the bell, I've added a little foam adhesive and I've left a little gap in the middle. That's so that I can have a little lift from the front layer of the bell and the back layer. And I leave room to attach my little dinger. I don't know what this thing is called. The little thing that makes the bell ring. That'll allow me to slip that between the foam adhesive there. And I've cut a contrasting color of that peacock. So I liked the way the stardust and the peacock looked together. So I went ahead and die cut that to use as my contrast color on this card. And I also made two versions. So this one I did the lighter yellow on top of the top of the bell with the peacock accents. And then I did another version using the peacock with the yellow accents. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use, so I made both, and then I made my decision once I started putting my card together. And you can see I went with the peacock with the yellow accents. Again, we're going to use that greenery, the layering winter greenery set, to create our little arrangement. The little bow that comes in that bell set is so cute as well. I die cut that from the peacock and the, I think it's aqua sky. I can't keep all the names straight, but again, I'll have them all listed for you. And then once I've got my arrangement the way I want it, I will do the press and seal trick again. And this time I wanted to show you, I'm going to use that scrap piece, that scrap trick again, but this time I'm going to layer 3 scrap pieces on top of each other. And this is going to give that whole arrangement a little lift off of the background. So essentially I'm creating the equivalent to, you know, some foam tape, but I'm using up my scraps. I have a lot of them because I did a lot of die cutting. And why waste the foam tape when I've got those scraps that I can utilize? Now this card, I did feel like it could probably benefit from some more white. Looking at it, I was like, it's a little heavy. I have nothing to break the eye, and I knew I was going to emboss my sentiment in white. So what I ended up doing was cutting another one of those trim pieces from white and added those in. Now my sentiment, as I mentioned, is going to be heat embossed in white, and I'm using the Jingle All the Way sentiment set. I love that they have sentiments in this. Well, I think they always do this, but this release particularly, I noticed that all the sentiments complement the dies very well, but they're not so specific that you can't use them on your own. So if dies aren't your thing, you've still got great stamp sets to use for your sentiments. We're going to die cut that again and layer it up. And now we've just got a little bit more stability on that die cut. We'll adhere that with some foam tape, and you can see I added some peacock berries in there in that arrangement, and I still feel like this could use a little white, but hey, it is what it is. I can always tuck some white pieces in afterwards, right? Nobody will know. How will they know? Okay, so let's take a look at all of the finished cards. I followed that same formula using all of the same supplies. I did sprinkle in a couple extra here and there, but I'll tell you as we go through them. So the card that started it all, for the teal version with the stardust accents and that beautiful 3D embossing folder, love how this turned out so much. And I had scraps left over, so I decided to make a little matching tag. I grabbed the honeybee tag die and then did some partial embossing with that 3D embossing folder on the background, and then adhered my leftover pieces for a little arrangement. All right, for the gold yellow version, we used the teal accents and the holiday layering bells and the Jingle All the Way stamp set. This one led to another yellow version, but light being the color for the background, and purple accents. Here I just used that bow from that bell set, and I love it. Now that led to a purple version. Now for this one, I used the Spellbinders Fluted Circles die to kind of ground everything, and the Artsy Angel stamp set for our sentiment. This one then led to a red version. I used the exact same layout, but I used only 2 layers. I used 3 layers from the poinsettia, but it's really only 2. The third layer is doubled. So you could, add some more dimension to this, but I love this one. Love it with that stardust. So we went from the reds, and I chose red as the accent color and navy blue as our base color with some bright blue in there on our bird. And this one I love this one as well. Navy's always a winner in my book. And then I did another version, again, using that Spellbinders as our base, that Spellbinders circle die. And then I went with the bright blue for our base this time. I absolutely love the way all of these cards turned out. And like I said, there were some rejects, but hey, I think we came out with a lot of great usable cards. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for sticking it out. All the cards were finished off with gems and pearls from Honeybee Stamps. And again, like I mentioned, everything will be linked in the product. Why do I keep saying that? Everything will be linked in the description box below, as well as on our blog at blog.w+9.com. So if you want to see more, make sure you head over there. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.